Hi, Andrew Cuneo here with a new video. This time it's about blue-white control in Alchemy. There's a bunch of new control tools in Alchemy, and I think some of them are quite good. I think some of them are quite bad. So I'm going to go over how I've chosen to build this deck and why I think the ones I've chosen are good and why the ones I've chosen not to play are bad. So for starters, I think that Key to the Archive is one of the best control tools in Alchemy. 4-mana artifact, comes into play tapped. You can tap it for any 2 colors of mana, so it taps for 2 mana, which is a pretty big deal. And when it enters the battlefield, you're going to draft a card from its spellbook and then discard a card. So you can wind up just discarding the card you drafted if you get a bad draft. But I would say Approach of the Second Sun is probably the one that most people are happiest to hit because you've just played, you presumably have 6 mana in play because you just played Key to the Archive with 4 mana. So you've got guaranteed 6 mana unless you were using treasures to get it out. So you're pretty likely to be able to play Approach of the Second Sun the next turn, and then that sets you up to win pretty easily. But there's other good stuff you can get too. Day of Judgment, just a sweeper. Time Warp is usually not really that good in this style of deck, but it can be really good if you have Planeswalkers out, and it always just replaces itself, so it's not really ever bad. Counterspell, great card. At the time you're untapping with Key to the Archive, like, you don't really gain that much that you've got a 2-mana counter instead of a 3 counter, but still just being able to put a counter into your hand at will in the mid-game can be very good. Demonic Tutor, another great card, but like your deck's not really probably going to be set up as a combo kill deck, so you're going to get whatever your best card is, but you're not playing the kind of deck where you would probably play a tutor on its own. So it's great, but a little situational. Doomblade, Bolt, some removal spells. Claim of the Firstborn is the first whammy. I don't think you're ever going to really want to get it in your Key to the Archive deck. I mean, maybe in some weird corner case scenario where somebody has a Ren and 7 token that's gotten really large, it would be good to steal it. But in general, you're not going to ever want to take that. Crossing Grip, really narrow. It's probably not going to be a card you're going to pick most of the time. Regrowth, solid. It's about the same as Demonic Tutor. Maybe a little bit worse. Despark, narrow, but it can be very good. A lot of these control mirrors, both people are just playing Key to the Archive, so if you actually get to despark their Key to the Archive, you're both getting rid of 2 of their mana, and you may be making it so they can't even cast the spell they got off of Key to the Archive, because you need the colored mana to cast the spell, so you're relying on the mana that the Key to the Archive produces to cast a lot of these cards. Electrolyze can be fine. I mean, it's not super powerful, but in the right spot, it can be a very good card. Growth Spiral's kind of a whammy. It replaces itself, but at the point where you're getting the Growth Spiral, it's pretty useless usually. So you would really only take that if there was nothing else that was useful at all. Lightning Helix can be good in the right spot. Putrefy, same deal. Also, Putrefy is another card that you can kill your opponent's Key to the Archives with, which will come up potentially. So that's sort of, I think that this is perhaps, it's certainly the flashiest of the Alchemy cards for control, and it has been pretty good for me. The other Alchemy card that I'm playing is Unexpected Conversion, and this is a really fancy card that's basically just divination. Well, it's divination with a fancy upside, I guess I would say. So you always draw 2 cards, so divination. Then what you can do is, after you draw the 2 cards, you can choose 1 instant or sorcery card in your hand, exile it. You can search your library and exile any number of copies of that same card. And then if you exile a card from your hand, you seek an instant or sorcery from your deck. So what that means is, in game 1s, you can play some more situational cards, and if it looks like they're not going to be useful against your opponent's particular deck, you can effectively cycle them into new instants or sorceries, and you can get all the copies out of your deck. So I think that this allows you to be more aggressive in playing narrow cards in your main deck, which is very nice. So in this deck, I've chosen to play 4 Doomskars, which are usually either great or next to useless, depending on what your opponent's playing. Same thing with Test of Talents. It's usually either great or it may be literally uncastable. So I've got Unexpected Conversion, where if those are sitting in my hand and I don't think they're going to be useful, I can convert them into more useful cards and get the other copies out of my deck. Also, Key to the Archive requires you to discard a card, so you can discard these narrow cards if they're not going to be useful in a particular matchup. Also, this card just plays really well with the double-faced lands like Jwari Disruption, because you might have a Jwari Disruption that you just know it's just going to be a tapped land for you and you don't need the land, so you can get rid of it. Same thing with Emeria's Call. There is a little bit of a downside there where you do have Jwari Disruption in your deck, so if you're seeking an instant or sorcery card, you might wind up getting a Jwari Disruption if that wasn't the card that you chose to exile. But all in all, I think that this is enough of an upside over Divination to make it pretty interesting to play. I've been trying it a bunch and I think it's very strong. Also, one thing I'll say about playing with Key to the Archive is that a lot of the card drawing people are used to playing with in Standard is 4-mana card drawing. I think with Key to the Archive, you want to play cheaper card drawing, so Unexpected Conversion, because you don't want to just have a giant glut of spells at 4 mana. Like you need to, if you're going to play Key to the Archive, you need to find cards you want to put into your deck that cost less than 4 mana. So instead of playing 4 Memory Deluges, I've got a split of Unexpected Conversions and Memory Deluges. Then there's a lot of kind of existing cards that you would sort of expect to be in a deck. There's Portable Hull. I do have Hullbreaker Horrors in my deck, which I wanted to talk about this card. This has been a pretty controversial card, at least in Standard. When it first came out, within like a week, people thought it was just completely broken and it was just a completely ridiculous card. And then when we got to the set championship, people were divided between thinking that it was like a situational role player card for Izzet mirrors, and some people just thought it was unplayable. I think it's a fine card, and now that Epiphany is banned, you do need a different blue top end. I think this card absolutely demands that you play with things that ramp it into play, though. I think if the best your deck can do is play 7 lands and cast this on turn 7, this is not going to be a good card for you. I think it works really well with Key to the Archive because Key to the Archive ramps you into it. So you can conceivably play it on turn 5 if you just play 4 lands, Key to the Archive, play your 5th land, play the Horror. So I think that these two cards kind of go together. And that's one of the reasons I've chosen to build my deck like this. The fact that I'm playing Hullbreaker Horror is one of the main reasons I've considered in my deck, because you want to have cheap instants with Hullbreaker Horror. And I'm not a big fan. I know people really love playing Fading Hope. I think it makes a lot of sense if you're playing with Lear. I'm not playing Lear in this deck, so I don't have Fading Hope. Then I've got some other instant speed removal. Valorous Stance, which I've been really impressed with Valorous Stance in this deck because it gives you a way to kill opposing Hullbreaker Horrors and Lears. And also you can protect your own Hullbreaker Horror. And a lot of the creature decks honestly just play creatures that are big enough that this thing kills it. Fateful Absence is a little bit of a catch-all. It can kill Planeswalkers, which is nice. It can kill creature lands, which can be a big problem for this archetype. So, obviously the card disadvantage of this card is not great, but you have a lot of ways to get ahead on cards anyway, so trading a little bit of card disadvantage for efficiency is something that you're in the market for at times. I would not play a ton of copies of this card, but I do think that it's okay in small amounts. Then, like I said, I have Test of Talents. I've got 4 Divide by Zeros, which I think is completely standard for any blue control deck at this point. 2 Saw It Comings. I wanted to play a couple more hard counters. People had largely moved away from hard counters in Standard, but I think maybe things have powered down a little bit to make it more appealing to play with them. I wanted to give them a try. Then I've got 2 Planeswalkers. I'm going to start with Teferi, who's slow as the sunset. This is basically yet another card that combos with Key to the Archive, because the +1 ability untaps an artifact and a land. So it's sort of like +1, get 3 mana if you have Key to the Archive in play. Then the -2 ability gives you some card advantage, which is fine if you're not doing anything with your mana. A pretty common sequencing with this deck is going to be play Key to the Archive on turn 4, turn 5, play Teferi, tapping the key and 2 lands, and then untap the key in one of those lands and then play another card like a Doomskar, or divide by 0 and another removal spell. Basically, this is sort of a mana ramp card that also can be a card advantage card. It also gains 2 life, which matters too. So this card is not the greatest card in the world, but it does a lot of little things in this deck, which I think makes it good enough. Then I've got one Niko Aris, which is a Planeswalker I've always liked, which has never really had a home. So what it does for you is it gives you a source of card advantage, which scales with the amount of mana you have. So this deck, because of the Key to the Archive, you ramp, so you can potentially play this for a large amount of X. And it also allows you to have a removal spell for a tapped creature because of the -1, where it deals 2 damage to tapped creatures for each card you've drawn. You will get to pick off creatures with that from time to time. The +1 ability, not really useful at all in this deck. I mean, in theory, you could use it to untap a Hullbreaker Horror, put a Hullbreaker Horror in your hand if you want to protect it from sorcery speed removal somehow. Realistically, you're not going to use that ability. You're just going to be plussing to get more loyalty on the Niko if the loyalty has gotten too low. One thing that's nice about this card is if you're playing against the blue-red deck, the blue-red decks have this inherent advantage that they can play Expressive Iteration. So their card advantage card, they can play in very early turns where there's generally no threat of tapping out at sorcery speed. So a lot of times they'll just, their third turn will just be play Expressive Iteration, find a land off the Expressive Iteration to put into play, and then put one card in my hand. If you have Niko in your hand, you can just play Niko for X is 0 on your third turn, and then, minus it and get a shard token. And so you've got something in play that's going to allow you to generate an advantage as well as the game goes on. So it puts them in a little bit of a tougher spot with Expressive Iteration. Expressive Iteration is still a much better card than Niko, but that is a play pattern that matters. Then there's 4 Doomskars, and then the lands are basically what you would expect. Couple creature lands, the Jwari Disruptions, like I said. The 8 good duels. There's this new duel, Forsaken Crossroads, which is kind of like a cross between a Pathway and maybe a Temple. I think this is a good card. I think it's one of the better cards in Alchemy. I think that you're going to want to play some number in most 2-color decks. I'm still a little bit unsure exactly how many you want to play. I've chosen to play 2 here. I don't feel strongly that 2 is the right number over 4 or 3 or 1. I think probably you don't want to play 0. It's the only thing I would say thus far. I do want to cover a couple of cards that I'm not playing. So the first one is Geist Channeler, which I guess I haven't even crafted. Yeah. All right, so this is a 1/3 that when it enters the battlefield, you choose an instant or sorcery with mana value 3 or greater. It costs 2 less to cast perpetually. So even if this dies, it still costs 2 less to cast. If you do something like with Lear, where you're going to cast the same spell multiple times, it's still going to cost 2 less to cast. I don't think this is a very good card. People have been playing it a lot, and when it works, it's great. But it is generally a card that relies on you having a good draw for it to function. I think generally when you're building a competitive Magic deck, you want to have cards that lead to you having good nut draws, but you don't want to play a lot of cards that when they're in your hand and you don't have a nut draw, they do almost nothing. So this card, if you don't have the instant or sorcery you want to reduce the casting cost of in your hand on turn 2 when you want to play this card is really bad. So most people pair it with this card, Discover the Formula, which is 6 mana, seek 3 non-land cards. They all cost 1 less to cast. So they're trying to do Discover the Formula for 4 mana, or maybe Unexpected Windfall for 2 mana, or maybe they're trying to do Auron's Epiphany, they're trying to make it cheaper. It doesn't make a ton of sense to try to make Memory Deluge cheaper. I think this card, when it works, is great, but I just don't think it's going to work often enough to actually be worth playing. I also think that it's a mistake not to play Hullbreaker Horror if you're expecting to play Blue Mirrors, which I think that you probably should be expecting to play Blue Mirrors in this Alchemy format. And this card doesn't make Hullbreaker Horror cheaper, and Hullbreaker Horror is going to be one of the expensive cards in your deck, so there's not room for a ton of expensive instants. I think the thing that's going to really determine whether or not this is a good card is if it turns out to actually be a good play to play Geist Channeler and make your Divide by Zero cost 1 mana. People are doing that as like kind of their fallback position. I'm not sure that's really worthwhile. If that works out to be a card that, if that's a play pattern you're happy with, this is going to be a card you're happy with. I think if that's a play pattern that you're kind of unhappy with, this is probably going to be a bad card. So I'm not playing it. I honestly haven't even tried it. I've played against it a lot. It doesn't look particularly good to me. Like I said, it's mostly used with Discover the Formula, which is in my sideboard. I don't think this card's particularly good either. I wanted to play one card draw card I could board in my sideboard, and I decided to play with this one just to try it. I think it might be worse than Memory Deluge, but I wanted to actually give this one a try. The rest of the sideboard, so there's the normal Divide by Zero lessons. There's 1 Sciences, 1 Teachings of the Archaics, and 1 Mascot Exhibition. That's completely standard. There's some more cheap creature removal, 2 more Portable Holes. Portable Holes are a great card. There's a split between 1 Circle of Confinement and 1 Fierce Retribution. Fierce Retribution is really nice in that it can kill creature lands. It's very good against creature lands. Circle of Confinement is really nice in that it's a good answer to Old Growth Troll. It's also a good answer to some creatures that might never attack you or you want to kill before they attack you, like a Werewolf Pack Leader, something like that. So I've got 1 and 1. As I play more with the deck, I might decide that 1 is just enough better than the other one, that you should really just have 2 of 1 and none of the other, but I think they both have their places. Got 2 Sunset Revelries. I'm not a huge endorser of this card. Honestly, I'm just playing with it because I haven't played Blue-White Control in a while and I wanted to try playing with it. It's obviously great when it works. I'm not sure that there's enough spots where this is actually a good card for it to be worth having in the sideboard, but I wanted to try some more with it. I've got 1 Reidane, which is kind of a tech for like Key to the Archive mirrors because it does make the key more expensive, which is a really big drawback for the key. And also people who are playing with the key are going to be playing other cards that it also makes more expensive. I'm not sure that you can't do better than Reidane. Like it might be better just to play more Malevolent Hermits or more counters. This is another card that I'm kind of just playing with to get some reps in to see if I like it in this style of deck. Obviously, Reidane is really good in normal creature decks. Another Valorous Stance, which is great if you play against people with Smoldering Egg, Hullbreaker Horror, Lear, cards like that. 1 Disdainful Stroke in the sideboard to board in usually Blue Mirrors. I mean, occasionally you'll play against a deck that's got like a lot of Wrenn and 7s or a lot of Waltz, something like that. I think it's important to play Disdainful Stroke and not negate because you do want to be able to counter Lear. And this is not a deck that has access to go blank. So Lear is a really effective card once it gets into play. You want to counter it, so you don't want it to let it into play, which is why I've chosen Disdainful Stroke over Negate or over more Malevolent Hermits. If you notice, the sideboard has 6 cards that I'll be boarding in if I play any Blue Mirrors. So 2 Hermits, a Stroke, a Reidane, Valorous Stance, and 1 Discover the Formula. And those will be coming in for 4 Doomskars and 2 Portable Holes. So that's kind of a standard sideboarding. The anti-creature cards, you obviously board them in when you want anti-creature cards. Usually you'll be taking out Test of Talents. Beyond that, it'll depend a little bit on exactly what you've seen out of your opponent's deck. You might want to cut Saw It Coming. You might want to shave a Hullbreaker Horror. You might decide that the Planeswalkers aren't good enough, especially in games where you're maybe where you know you're going to be on the draw. But that's the general approach to sideboarding I would take. So I'm going to go ahead and get into some games now, and we'll see how it works out. On the play. I like being on the play, although it does make that Forsaken Crossroads card worse. It's a pretty strong hand. It's pretty rare that you want to play Emeria's Call in the spell form in this deck. It's in the deck in part just because it gives you something that you can cycle away to unexpected conversion. I'm up against a white-black deck. So this could be a pretty wide variety of things. It is a Cleric's deck, and I played the wrong land, so I couldn't Jwari Disruption that. Alright. Not ideal. I do have the portable hole in my hand. I maybe should have just hold it and hoped to play Jwari Disruption. That's going to be a better target, I would say. Portable hole. I'll probably just be pitching Jwari Disruption, assuming I'm able to draw something good. So my choice, Bolt, Electrolyze, or Counterspell. I think I should take a removal spell. I think I'm just going to take Electrolyze. It'll probably be able to kill the Voice of the Blessed. It will definitely be able to kill the Elite Spellbinder. They're making my Hullbreaker Horror cost 9. That is a lot of mana to pay for a Hullbreaker Horror. I guess I should start with this because this is the card I definitely want to play this turn. We'll see about other things. I'll just hold this and I'll leave up Jwari Disruption for the turn. There's a decent chance I'm going to get to play this for 3 cards next turn. Wow, this is great. This is another one of the new cards, kind of like Collected Company. People have been very excited about it. And I get to play a Niko for 2. See what they get to put into play. That's one of the better things they could hit. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I think I'm just going to make another shard token and pass. This way, if they attack, I can activate the Hall of Storm Giants to eat the Inquisitor Captain. They are going to get to use Righteous Valkyrie to kill Niko, I'm pretty sure. They're kind of repping that they have a removal spell that since they've decided to attack on the ground. So I'm not going to play the Hullbreaker Horror this turn. They don't have enough mana to play a removal spell that would kill the Hall of Storm Giants and pay the ward cost. And I'll be able to crack a shard. So I'm in good shape. Another Righteous Valkyrie. I may want to get an attack in with the Hall of Storm Giants just to keep their life total at a lower level so the Valkyries don't turn on. I also have a lot of removal spells in my deck that can kill those, so it's not that big of a deal. That's fine. They might be able to still get their life total up to 27 this turn. Yeah, looks like they're going to. Probably really need a Doomskar now. Oh, that's good. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I can flash in the Horror and play Fateful Absence. I think the Horror is probably going to die this turn, but they'll need to leave some removal up if they want to attack on the ground. If they don't even have Vanishing Verse this turn, they are not in good shape. I'm going to assume that they're not playing with Wraths in their deck. It'd be pretty weird to have a Wrath in your Cleric's deck. Playing with Inquisitor Captain, this thing, it has a requirement that you have 20 creatures that cost CMC 3 or less. That is a really substantial requirement because it only counts the ones that are in your hand, library, or graveyard. So in order for this thing to be reliably on, if you have some creatures in play, they're not going to count. If you have creatures that are exiled, they're not going to count. So you really need to have like 24 or 25 cheap creatures in your deck. Plus 4 of these, presumably, means that you really don't actually get to play many non-creature cards in a deck with Inquisitor Captain. It's another one of the new cards. It's pretty good. Do I want to Doomskar? Kind of past the point where that's that good. Ooh, a second Hullbreaker Horror. All right, so this is obviously a Cleric deck. What do I want? I probably want my Portable Holes, Circle of Confinement, Fierce Retribution, Valorous Stance. I probably don't want any of this other stuff. This can hit the Inquisitor Captain, but that's it. I don't think I really want to make 1/1s on the ground to block so many other creatures fly. I don't think I want to Discover the Formula. It might actually be okay, though. It might be better than Teferi. I definitely don't want Test of Talents. I know that much. Maybe I'll just take out the Teferis. Kind of feel like I don't need two Hullbreaker Horrors. I'm going to try one copy of Discover the Formula over one Saw It Coming. If anything, I maybe just have too many portable holes. They're going to have they probably have like 12 really good targets, I would say, for portable hole. A lot of their creatures are bigger than this hits, but 12 is a pretty big number. I just need to bear in mind as I'm playing that I don't want to be saving my portable holes for the perfect target. I should just use them when I get the chance to. It's a pretty good hand. Consider is a nice card in that it powers up the Niko minus ability. So I could potentially deal 4 to a tapped creature in a turn. I'm not going to wind up holding the Consider to do that in this hand. I'm going to play it right away, but just as a general thing, to having ways to make the Niko minus deal more than 2 damage, it's pretty nice. If they play a 2-drop, it would be really nice to hit a Portable Hole or a Circle of Confinement, just anything that I could cast on my second turn so that I can play Unexpected Conversion without having to discard the hand size. Valorous Stance might be castable. If they play Righteous Valkyrie here, I can just shoot it right out of the sky. Why is this just on the stack? Oh, so this has a triggered ability when it comes into play, so they actually could have responded to that ability. They had a card that could kill a Planeswalker, but they can't kill it with Vanishing Verse because it's gold. So they could have maybe Vanishing... If they have Vanishing Verse, they're getting priority in case they want to Vanishing Verse their Voice of the Blessed. One thing that's nice with Niko, or just Planeswalkers in general, that comes up sometimes with this deck, is if they're about to die, you can divide by 0 them back to your hand. So this game might play out in a way where they decide to attack the Niko, and I just divide by 0 it back to my hand. Like if they don't take divide by 0 here, that's almost definitely what's going to happen. I think I like having card draw in my deck in sideboarding games against creature decks more than a lot of people do. I think it's easy to make a mistake where you board out too much of your card draw to make your deck too cheap. And then you just have a bunch of cards that trade 1 for 1, and then you have more lands than your opponent and you lose. I think the right way to approach sideboarding a control deck against a creature deck is to view your cheap removal as the bridge that's getting you to your card draw. So if I take Jwari Disruption, I think I'm going to take Jwari Disruption here because I can cycle it away with Unexpected Conversion. I'm kind of expecting them to take Discover the Formula. If they don't take Discover the Formula, I can just play the Jwari Disruption as a land. It'll be a little bit awkward because then I won't have access to the 5-mana divide by 0. I'm not really sure what they're going to take. It depends on what's in their hand, what their best option is. They've decided it's Valorous Stance, which probably means that they have Righteous Valkyrie in their hand. I could lead up Divide by 0, but I want to be sure to spend my mana this turn, so I'm just going to play Unexpected Conversion. And like I said, I took the Jwari Disruption just for this purpose. And I'm going to get them out of my library as well. I don't really want to draw them. It's especially nice to be getting them out of my library before I play Discover the Formula, because I'll no longer be able to seek them. I've tried this white-black cleric deck. It's really good against kind of the basic creature decks, but against the blue decks, it's kind of hopeless, I think. Too much of the power of your deck is contained in cards that gain life, which gaining life just doesn't do anything. They're probably going to take Discover the Formula this turn. Now I've got the Fateful Absence if they attack with the Hive of the Eye Tyrant. I can counter any spell I care about. If they play a spell I don't care about, I'm going to crack my shard. So I'm in great shape. Do I care about the Righteous Valkyrie? I think no. It doesn't really hit very hard. I'd rather save my Slide Coming to deal with a potential Inquisitor Captain. So it's going to cost me 3 life to take this. I think it's probably worth it. Because I'm going to play the Emeria's Call untapped, so that I still have access to Slide Coming. Because like I said, I want to counter Inquisitor Captain. I've got the Portable Hole that I'll be discarding. I guess I'll take Lightning Helix. Gives me another answer to the Hive of the Eye Tyrant, so now I can use my Fateful Absence on something else if I want to. I could Fateful Absence this thing, but they probably don't have anything to do with their mana, so they would get the card right away. I think I'm just going to let it sit there for a little bit. I got a bargain basement, 1 mana Consider, and a 1 mana Portable Hole. That wasn't that great. I'll be honest, I was hoping to do better than that. I mean, I'm going to be able to kill the Righteous Valkyrie now with Fierce Retribution, so it's fine, but that could have gone better. One thing you can do with this deck is you can divide by 0 your Key to the Archive or Hullbreaker Horror it, if you really want to dig for Approach of the Second Sons, which that's probably going to be the easiest way for me to win this game. Eventually I could win with Hall of Storm Giants. I might want to start getting some attacks in with that if they continue to just sit here doing nothing. I can also, of course, play the Divide by 0 and go and get Mascot Exhibition, which is another way that the game could end. I'm not really hurting for ways to end the game, even though I took the 1 Hullbreaker Horror out of my deck. They're duressing me. Sure, you can have your choice of creature removal. They took my discount Doomskar. They left me with the full price one. But I'll be able to manage. I did foretell saw it coming there on my previous turn specifically because I didn't want them to play a duress. Yeah, that's fine. I'll just fire this off in response. Let's get... I want another key to the archive, or do I just want... What do I want? I certainly want unexpected conversion, and I guess I just want another key to the archive. And I will live with no portable hole and no Fateful Absence. My deck isn't particularly reliant on the graveyard, so go blank really isn't that scary. What do you got for me? I guess I'd prefer a Putrefy to a Field of Ruin. Do I want to cycle one of these removal spells? I don't think I need to. If they don't do anything this turn that I care about, I am actually going to divide the key to the archive back to my hand. And then cycle this island into a spell. And get Mascot Exhibition, I suppose. It really doesn't matter exactly what I do at this point. Their deck does not have enough power to compete with what my deck's capable of doing once I get this much mana. And they also just don't even have enough lands to play multiple cards a turn. Really feels like they have Vanishing Verse in their hand. They keep getting priority at weird times where it's really just giving them the opportunity to kill their own creature. I'm not even going to counter that. I know I said I was saving the Saw It Coming to try to counter it, but I think I'll just Doomskar it. If it's even something I need to kill. I should probably play the Doomskar before I play the Mascot Exhibition. It's the only real constraints on how I should approach the game. Good old 7-mana Doomskar. Guess I'll foretell this one. And I'll take my Scry. Alright. That should probably finally bring this game to a close. I wonder if they go blank me, I might actually counter it. Do I want to counter that one? I don't think I need to. Oh, it's a 4/4. That's nice for them. You do need to be a little bit wary of the fact that I suspect they have Vanishing Verse. If they attack, I think I'll animate the Hall of Storm Giants. Try to use it to block. I was not expecting this to just work. I do get a creature back. Spellbinder's a little annoying. We're doing this again. I don't really want to just let them Vanishing Verse the Hullbreaker Horror, so I'm not going to cast it at the end of their turn. Unless they tap out, and I guess they don't know about this Doomskar, so they might actually play a bunch of creatures. That isn't the Vanishing Verse I was expecting, but it is basically the same card. Alright, so it looks like they probably have some sort of counter. Or not counter, a removal spell, but I'm going to get to go Hullbreaker Horror, Putrefy, Hive of the Eye Tyrant, and bounce the Elite Spellbinder. And still have access to Sod coming. can also just putrefy the Hive of the Eye Tyrant. Bounce the Hullbreaker Horror. I think I'm going to putrefy the Spellbinder, bounce the Hullbreaker Horror. You can also use Hullbreaker Horror to bounce your Key to the Archives. If I wind up in a spot where I'm not doing, if I don't have something better to do with the trigger on this, I'll do that. Go blank. Doesn't do anything. Nice. This hand I'm gonna keep, but depending on what they're playing, it can wind up working out pretty bad. All right, they're playing a blue deck. Excellent. So Test of Talents is going to be great, and Niko Aris is probably something I can just play on turn. Three. Maybe not against the Geist Channeler. I may have to be a little bit slower with it now. Consider was not the card they chose to make cheaper. You're not even allowed to choose to make it cheaper. If you would like to. It's kind of funny. I guess that's to prevent people from misclicking, or just to make it clear to everyone that you should not try to choose to make your consider cheaper. One damage a turn is pretty easy to ignore. Okay, they're going to make something else cheaper now. Scribe to the top. If I wanted to, I could field their field. Get rid of their scry. I think I'm just going to take this opportunity to resolve the key. It seems kind of likely that what they've done is scried a land to the top, and they're going to resolve the Discover card here, which will allow them to do something pretty effective. They didn't even try to cast it. I guess I'm just going to leave all my counters up. It seems like they're very likely to spend their mana this turn. But perhaps not. This is one of the problems with the Geist Channeler. Not that you know, sometimes don't have spells in your hand. It's just, sometimes it's just worse than a land. Like, you can't shave lands from your deck to play with this card, I don't think. Which means that, you just need to have so many things that are essentially mana sources in your deck. I don't really feel any pressure to do anything. They're about to have to discard to hand size or play under my permission. Yeah. Let's Test of Talents that. Their hand is 3 Leers, a Divide, a Hullbreaker Horror, and a... Consider, what's this card? Oh, it's the thing that goes and gets the fish. That's kind of cool. I'm gonna play this for 4. So if they draw a land, I'm going to be countering Leer. They have the thing that goes and gets the fish in their deck. Wow. All right, like I said, I want Disdainful Stroke against Leer. Against their particular deck, I'm a little bit worried about the Angler, the guy who goes and gets the fish, so I'm probably not going to board in Reidane. We'll board in the Hermits and the Valorous Stance. Now we all play 1 Circle of Confinement against the thing that gets the fish. The thing that gets the fish probably isn't actually going to be very good, but it is a way they could conceivably win. It seems like they're a Hullbreaker Horror deck that doesn't have any way to ramp the horror into play, which I think puts them at a huge disadvantage when you play these kind of blue mirrors. Like I said when I was going over the deck list, I think if you want to play with Hullbreaker Horror, you really need to play Unexpected Windfall or Key to the Archive. And even like you could play the Celestis. I don't have any copies of that in my deck because I don't really like artifact mana sources that much. 3 Archives was the most I was willing to delve into. I guess you could also try to build like a blue-green horror deck where you're ramping with green ramping sources. That would be a pretty unusual deck. I'm not exactly sure what the payoff for doing that would be. But just don't try to play Hullbreaker Horror where your plan is to just make 7 land drops and then cast it. It's going to be too slow against the aggressive decks, and it's going to be easily outclassed by the people who are playing blue decks that actually ramp into it. Wow, Circle of Confinement's looking good here. I should have anticipated they were going to have Malevolent Hermits. Didn't think of it. Are we going to see the fish guy? The fish guy would be kind of annoying here. No fish guy. Is this a safe turn to play Divination? It probably is. It seems pretty likely it's just going to get Divide by Zeroed, but that's fine. I'll probably go like Divide by Zero, Teachings of the Archaics, and then I'll be able to untap and play Teferi, who slows the Sunset. Which isn't the greatest answer, but it's something. Either way, I think maybe I won't jam Teferi. If they leave all their mana untapped, I'll just pass with Memory Deluge up. I'm going to need to be careful once they get to 6 mana. I don't really want to let them resolve that Discover card. Hmm. That's more than a little scary. I think I'll just deluge in response. Pretty important not to fall behind on land drops in these mirrors. It's kind of the most important thing. Or just not fall behind on mana, because the only real way to beat Hullbreaker Horror in these mirrors is to just out-mana your opponent. Because both people kind of have the same answers with the Hullbreaker Horrors. They're just going to try to divide by 0 them a bunch. Maybe they'll Fading Hope it, or like I can play Valorous Stance, which is going to put it back in their hand a lot of the time. So you just need to be ahead on lands. That's fine. I guess if they divide by 0 this circle again, it'll come back face up, so they'll sort of be getting more value. That'd be a little bit annoying, but honestly, divide by 0 is one of the key cards in this matchup, so having them kind of fighting having them use their divide by 0s to fight over Circle of Confinement isn't the worst thing in the world. We've got 1 divide and 2 considers in the yard. Alright, this has gotten a little scary. Let's see if I can find a Valorous Stance. If I don't find a Valorous Stance, I'm going to divide by 0 this. I did find a Valorous Stance. I'm lucky. I don't know if they have a horror in their hand, but they easily could. I think they had... We saw 3 Leers in the first game. Ew. We have to resolve that, which is not great for me. Don't want to try to beat them with approach. I think I just want regrowth, honestly. The plan being that I'm going to regrowth a divide by 0 or a Valorous Stance, depending on how the game plays out. Is it even worth dividing this? Things have gotten a little bit scary. Probably still manageable, though. Let's start by getting back a divide by 0. I maybe should have started by playing the Benevolent Geist. This doesn't seem worthwhile on the opponent's part. I'm gonna resolve Memory Deluge while I can. I need to be prepared for the next fight over Hullbreaker Horror. If they get a Leer, it'd be really bad for me. But I've already burned through 2 of their Leers and 1 of their Horrors. They may not have that much stuff left that does anything scary. Okay, they've got a key to the archive. That's something. How much did they have to pay? They only had it discounted by 1. Bummer. I guess I didn't notice the key to the archives in their deck the first time around. They got another Hermit. It's pretty nice for them. Actually, should I just start with the Hullbreaker Horror? Seems fine. I guess what I actually should have done is I should have floated some mana. That's fine. Maybe should have played this thing first and not let them cast their negate. Does this spell the end? They can deck themselves? I think if they don't find another Hullbreaker Horror, they're actually not in great shape. Do they have any Fading Hopes down here? A bunch of Considers. Why is it so hard to look at their graveyard? They have one more Divide by Zero. Oh, the Angler's making an appearance. It's time to get some fish. Huh. I don't know that their deck actually had enough left to win in it. I'm surprised they conceded there, but they may actually not have been able to win that game. It wasn't clear to me that I was actually going to lose. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please subscribe if you have not already subscribed to my channel. And also, if you could leave a comment. For this video, I went much more into depth in describing my choices and building the deck, both because it was using some new cards that I had some pretty strong opinions on, and also just because I think that might be the part of the videos people are liking more. So just leave a comment if you want to see more time spent on the deck techs or you want to see more of the gameplay. Just tell me which you would prefer, because I'm happy to do what people like. With that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.